No doubt get there. Okay, we're good to go. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for your patience. Just to say, members, because of the amount of late information, despite the fact actually there are four matters for consideration today, despite that fact, there's still quite a lot of late information coming through. And I think in terms of managing the meeting today, as we get to each application, we will consider the late information which is relevant to that application in advance of hearing the report, etc. So effectively, application number one will take some time to look through the late items. Application number 3, 4, and 6, the same thing. Okay. One more matter, Maura, that you wish to bring up? Yep, go ahead.
Sorry, Chair, I just forgot to give that earlier. There's an administration error in the paper item 1. Officers, in terms of the recommendation for item 1, it should read refuse in terms of officer recommendation, not approved. That was just an error, an administrative. Just want to highlight that before we begin, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Maura. Right, so members, item number 6, any matters arising from the open minutes of the Planning Committee meeting held on Wednesday, the 5th of October? None, thank you. And of course now, members, we will move on to item number 7 on the agenda, and that is our planning application list with recommendations for decision this afternoon. The first application number 1, and Sarah is going to present the officer report. Oh yes, thank you, Sarah. I just told everybody that. So members, before Sarah does that, of course, I've just told you you're going to have a look at the late items. There are a considerable number of late items for item number 1. I think it's reasonable to begin with that we give that 15 minutes. I no doubt, I'm very aware that you'll probably have all read through them. But if you haven't had an opportunity, because some late items have just arrived so late that we can never be sure if everybody's been able to see it all. So we'll take 15 minutes to look through those late items. And Sarah, thank you for keeping me right on that. Short-term memory there, memory loss. 15 minutes, folks. Mark, do members require any further time to consider the matters, a matter of the late information? Any members online? Okay,
John, I'm still reading at the minute.
okay, Philip, I'll give you, can you give me an idea of how much time you think you'll need?
2 or 3 minutes just to finish this bit off, please.
Okay, we'll give it 5, Philip. Okay. Okay, members. Councillor McKinney, if you're content, we're going to move on.
Yes, Chair. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McKinney. Okay, members. So, item number 1 for decision, LA11/2019/0329/O. I know you're all very familiar with this, but of course there will be some element of change throughout the past number of months. So Sarah, I invite you now to present the officer report.
Item 1 is LA11 2019-0329-0. This was an outline application for a major housing application of approximately 258 residential units on Springtown Road. Members will recall that this application was presented to committee on the 18th of May 2022 with a recommendation to refuse permission with 7 reasons for refusal. Members voted not to accept officer's recommendation. The application was then notified to DFA on the 20th of May 2022. An Article 17 holding direction was issued by DFA on the 8th of June 22. On the 6th of October, DFA advised the Council that after careful consideration, the Minister decided that it is not necessary for the application to be called into the Department for determination. Therefore, officers are returning the application to committee to consider the conditions. There are 2 issues for members to consider, and the first relates to the access. DFA in their correspondence on the 6th of October stated, sorry, I'm just trying to get the slide moved on here. Okay. DFA in their correspondence on the 6th of October 22 stated, I note the road's concerns raised, particularly in relation to the access for this development, and the Minister would like to stress the importance of this issue being satisfactorily resolved by the Council before a decision is issued. Officers can advise members that the issues relating to the access were set out in the committee report for the meeting in May 22, and the access issues were also included as a reason for refusal, reason number 7 in that report. The May committee report is appended to officers' report presented at today's meeting. In summary, the issues relate to the fact that accurate plans had not been provided in the application to demonstrate a safe and sufficient access to this site, and as presented, the plans did not demonstrate compliance with the appropriate design standard for the access junction for a major development. The Ghost Island turning pocket had also not been designed correctly. To provide a safe access to the site, this requires existing walls along the frontage of numbers 44 to 50 Derrymore development on Springtown Road to be set back to accommodate the required visibility space, which will impact ground levels to the fronts of these properties. At the time of the application, DFI Roads advised that there may be sufficient space to provide an acceptable design for the vehicular access to the site, although they required confirmation through accurate detailed design drawings to include dimensions and proposed levels. DFI also considered that the demolition of numbers 44 and 45 Derrymore may also have to be considered to achieve an acceptable access design. These 2 properties are not included in the red line boundary of the application site. Officers would advise, however, that condition number 17 in your report requires that the detailed design of the access and Ghost Island Junction be submitted for agreement at reserved matters or full application stage. However, members should note if this requires the demolition of 2 additional dwellings to provide displays, these dwellings are not included in the current red line of the application site. The second issue for members to consider is in relation to the conditions. The applicant in this case requested an opportunity to view the conditions prior to issuing of the decision. The applicant raised concerns regarding conditions relating to the requirement for travel cards for a 10-year period, and these are set out in conditions 24, 25 and 26 in your committee report, and is also set out in late item correspondence from the applicant on a discussion paper dated the 17th of October. Officers responded to the applicant and provided information on travel cards, and this is also set out in your late item in a response from officers on the 26th of October. Officers liaised with DFI Roads relating to the travel card conditions, and DFI Roads on the 26th of October advised that in discussions with TransLink, that TransLink were content to revise the conditions and that the duration and funding of the cards was reduced from 10 years to 5 years. And this is also set out in your late item correspondence. It's a Roads response with the revised conditions. The applicant in further correspondence suggested that the conditions be removed and be replaced with a condition requiring the developer to enter into a Section 76 planning agreement. And this is set out in late item correspondence from the applicant on the 26th of October. Officers would advise members that council would only enter into the use of a planning agreement where what is required cannot be adequately addressed by the imposition of planning conditions. And this is set out in the SPPS and Development Management Practice Note 21. As the travel card requirement can be dealt with by condition, the use of a planning agreement in this particular case is therefore not necessary. Development Management Practice Note 21 advises that permission should not be granted subject to a negative condition that the developer enters into a planning agreement. Officers did not enter into a Section 76 planning agreement in this application, as officers considered that the principle of the major housing outside the development limits was not acceptable. Normally, Section 76 planning agreements are entered into early in the process and should be completed before permission can be issued. So officers' recommendation is that members agree the conditions which are set out in the report, but give consideration to the revised roads conditions relating to the travel cards 24, 25 and 26, which are detailed in your late items, and I will also provide them on the next slide. So that slide shows you the conditions, and just to advise that there's also an officer from DFA Roads in attendance at the meeting should there be any questions for the roads officer. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, so members, we do have a speaker, the agent on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Daniel McAteer. Daniel, you're very welcome again this afternoon. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for your patience and giving members further opportunity to consider those substantial late items that they had to have a look through over the last couple of days. So Daniel, just to advise again, the usual protocols apply. We'll give you an initial 5 minutes to address the committee. And so without further delay, I invite you now to address the committee. So over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to start by going to the conclusion of the discussion paper on the 26th.
Daniel, can I advise that your audio is not coming across terribly loud and clear in the chamber here at the minute?
Right. Well, maybe we could start the clock again.
I'll bear with you if you can see if you can sort that out.
Can you hear that? Is that easier, better? Is that any better?
It's not great.
Not sure. I'm on full tilt here.
Just bear with me. I'll see if the other members are content. Can you all hear that okay? Yeah.
Maybe.
Chair, I can hear it online here. I can hear it online.
Same as that, I can hear okay.
Okay, go ahead, Daniel. It might just be my hearing, I don't know. So, but I can near enough hear it well enough, I suppose. So again, sorry for the delay. Just wanted to make sure we could all hear you. Okay, so over to you.
Let me restart. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The scheme has had major public support since 2018 and has had the overwhelming support of locally elected members of the Planning Committee. In the circumstances, and given the unprecedented and inordinate delay associated with this application, and given that there appear to be no legal, policy or regulatory reasons to reject, the promoter's suggestion contained in the email dated 26th of October, the promoters now respectfully ask that 1, the certificate of planning be issued forthwith, and the conditions 24, 25 and 26 be removed and replaced with the above alternative condition, which is set out in the discussion paper on the 27th of November, or October, I should say. And turning to the discussion paper on the 1st of November and the conclusion, we say that the conditions that have been suggested by planning officers fail to meet each of the 6 tests, and therefore they must be removed in accordance with government guidance. Secondly, that the alternative conditions suggested by the promoters are reasonable, they are lawful, they are practicable, and they are easily enforceable. We say that the promoters' applicants in this case have acted reasonably at every stage of the process and have not objected to almost all of the conditions, even those which some of which are not necessary. For example, there is a condition for the provision of play areas, condition 8, but the provision of play areas has been a feature of the application from the outset, and therefore the condition was not necessary. Having said that, we're quite happy to see it so that everyone's clear what their obligations are, and that the planning officer an opportunity to make sure that we do what we're going to do. The paragraph 9 says that the imposition of conditions is ultimately a matter for the planning officers and the planning committee, and it is not a matter for the consultees or any other third party. The applicant promoters believe that the offensive conditions are not proper conditions at all, but represent the latest and a long line of unnecessary impediments to prevent the scheme becoming a reality. In the circumstances, the applicant's promoters respectfully ask that the members of the planning committee exercise their right to remove the conditions and replace them with the conditions proposed. One of the fundamental requirements of any condition is precision. When we first learned of this condition on the 13th of October, on the eve of the anticipated issue of the certificate, we were presented with 54 conditions. In those conditions, there was an inherent ambiguity because there was reference to providing free travel for everyone for 10 years, but in the same document, it said 5 years. In subsequent correspondence, the officers confirmed, sorry about the mistake, it really should be 10 years. There was then further conversations with DFI Roads, and we said, look, could you clarify your position? And they come back and said, well, look, we're open to talk about this, and we are open to talk about this. They subsequently came back and said that they're going to change the 10 years to 5 years. So we wrote to them and said, look, could you please clarify the precedent for establishing 5 years? And we got a response at 2:30 today that says that they're not in a position to answer the queries raised by us on the 25th of October, and they will get back to us by no later than the 15th of November. So the very fact that they go from 5 years to 10 years, back to 10 years, or maybe 5, maybe 10, there is imprecision in that, and therefore the condition must fail in law. There's a discussion on what the condition says and a discussion on the relevant government guidance. And that's, if I could ask members to refer to the discussion note on the 1st of November. I try and do it in a discussion section of paragraphs 5 and following that. And what I say at paragraph 5A is that the conditions are not reasonable, nor are they practicable, nor are they clear. They amount to broad, unnecessary controls. And in that regard, the conditions must fail. I set out then about what the so-called 6 tests for any condition are. Test question number 1, is the condition necessary? We say, no, it is not, because there's an alternative means of engagement whereby the planning committee can ensure that they get what they want and we can do what we are able to do. Is it relevant to planning? No, not necessarily. Is it relevant to the development? Possibly. Is it enforceable? Possibly not. Is it precise? Definitely not. And is it reasonable in all other respects? Definitely not. So the tests, if you fail one test, the committee must, it's not an option, the committee must reject those conditions. Now, we have been writing to DFI Roads, and the history of that exchange has been set out in the discussion note on the 27th of October. To cut a long story short, at every single hearing of this long and troubled road, we've asked people from DFI to come along, and they've refused to. We asked them would they come along today, and we haven't been told whether they would come along or not. And surprise, surprise, they're here today. The other thing I wish to go on record as saying for my last few seconds is this. We have now been ambushed about this access issue because we were led to believe that that was resolved. And in fact, it was going to be dealt with by way of a reserved matter. And we did not get a copy of the officer's report that was submitted. So I'm going on record formally now to say that we are taken by surprise with that. And in that regard, we reserve our position. And finally, we then discuss the relevant law about the application of conditions. I'm happy to take questions about that because I'm mindful, Mr. Chairman, that I've just spilled over the 5 minutes here. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McAteer. Thank you, Daniel. Members, open to yourselves now. If anybody has any questions in relation to what you've just heard from Mr. McAteer, please indicate either in the chat box or here in the chamber. I can see no further questions for you. Oh, Councillor Gallagher, coming on at the last second there. Go ahead.
I'll take the question, and I just, because Sarah brought it up there earlier, but I'll give it to him. The section 76, and officers were engaging with yourselves around section 76. Could you maybe elaborate on that more? Because I'll probably ask Sarah when it comes to her, but around officers saying they don't think section 76 applied, and And this was in regard to, because they think that this was outside the housing zone. And my question to Sarah, did you see the committee decision? Yeah. This was, well, you can elaborate on that. I'm just trying to get on that engagement. And I'm just thinking that there's a planning committee decision to approve this, not supersede the refusal of officers. What's the thoughts on that?
Thank you, Councillor Gallagher. So, Daniel, I think just Councillor Gallagher is asking for your reflection on the engagement around potential Section 76. Is that right, Councillor Gallagher? Yeah. Yep.
Thank you, thanks, Chair, for letting me in. Thank you, Councillor Gallagher, for the question. Our position is this. We believe that a Section 76, or indeed a section, and in fact, it's page 25 and 26 of the bundle and 27 of the bundle. Section 76 of the Planning Act Northern Ireland 2011 and Section 40 of the Planning Northern Ireland Order does give yourselves the power to ask us to enter into that agreement. I'm not sure that there's a prescribed note on the timing when that happens. I suppose in other jurisdictions, what you would have is that there'd be good engagement with the promoters and they would work collaboratively to find these solutions to problems, and they wouldn't really land on your desk in the way they've landed today. So our position is this. The conditions for the free bus travel, we say don't work, but what we will do is that we will engage with DFI Roads and with TransLink and indeed any other travel company that operates in this part of the country to come up with a solution that would ultimately satisfy the planning committee here. So we're very happy to engage, and we say that there is no legal estoppel to prevent that engagement. The timing is really a matter of sort of practice rather than legal requirements. So we could do that, you know, anytime after you give us our outline plan permission and get into the detail of that. We have been reaching out to TransLink, and they tell us they have a difficulty in quantifying the cost of this. And as I said, I did ask Lorraine Williams, how many schemes have they done in the area that have lasted for 5 years, and they said they're unable to give us an answer to that until 4 weeks after the question was asked. So, I mean, the agreement would become much more robust as well, Councillor, because once that agreement is set in stone, that's a legally binding agreement that binds us to it, and it may involve payment of money up front or whatever. So we're happy to engage and will engage if the council supports the granting of the application today, and make that a condition of the grant, which we have suggested. So we're not trying to dodge our responsibilities. We're trying to find a sensible way to get on with this.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah. Any other questions? Councillor Raymond Barr in the chat box there.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a question on one of the conditions. No, the condition that a TransLink travel card be provided to each household puzzles and concerns me. Is this a prerequisite for every development, or is it a selective condition? Have you experienced this before, Mr. McAteer?
Well, Councillor, what we did was we asked the DFI Roads and we asked the officers to be provided with details of precedents, and they provided us with 3 examples. One was a case up in Bishop Street, up at the Nazareth House, where there was a requirement for travel cards, but that's a city centre development. It's an old person's development. When I say old persons, I mean my age. But there's no car parking up there. And in fact, the developer that's done that scheme is the developer on this scheme. So it's completely non-comparable. The second example that was given was actually withdrawn. So that has no precedent value, as it were. So it doesn't really assist the conversation. The third one was the Thornhill Village, which, as some of you may know, is a retirement village for the over 55s. And it's a private sector. It's a very exclusive type of development there. So it doesn't sit at all in familiar territory with the social housing scheme that we have. So those are the 3 examples cited. 1, completely irrelevant. 2, a private sector development, retirement village, and the 3rd didn't count. The officers did refer to the fact that there are other developments in the town, for example, in the Waterside, that have gone into a Section 76 agreement or Section 40 agreement. And we said that's a more appropriate road to travel, and we will happily engage in that way, and we will go directly to TransLink or whatever company, and we will talk to DFI roads. We say that with a health warning as follows. We need to be careful that if we do a deal with TransLink, that we don't leave ourselves exposed to a legal action whereby other travel companies, private, public, cooperative, could basically say that this is anti-competition, where we're saying, okay, we're going to give TransLink £7.5 million and buy all these travel tickets. It's not a bad business to be on, if someone would do that. So we need to be careful that the council isn't actually creating a very, very dangerous booby trap for themselves down the line. However, if we go and negotiate reasonable terms that we're content to sign into, well, that kind of circumnavigates all the anti-competition rules. So that's where we are. So to answer your question, we can find no precedent at all for this type of condition in this region.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. No other indicated questions. Councillor Mooney.
Thank you, Chair. Just to pick up on what Mr. McAteer said earlier on there, perhaps maybe a legal officer could inform us. Would officers or would council be content with the aspect?
Councillor Mooney, I have to advise at this point the questions are only to Mr. McAteer. If you wish to ask officers questions, then please direct them after we finish with Mr. McAteer, if that's okay with you. Yeah. So if there's any further questions for Mr. McAteer, members, and then if there aren't, then of course I will open up the opportunity for questions to the officers, Sarah in particular, and other officers here if you so wish. Also to advise that there's a representative from DFA Roads on the call, should you have any questions that you might want to put to them in relation to access, parking, movement, etc. For this particular development. Just to, I suppose, a heads up, Councillor Barr asked that question as well, and that was in relation to travel card provision, etc., and other developments across city and district. And I'd certainly be interested to hear from officers as to how prevalent that is and what sorts of examples we have. I suppose on a lighter note, I do know many of the, or some of the applications that were referred to as for older people. I think I'm actually beyond the age as well, so I'm now an older person officially. Don't be offended, anybody. Okay, so members, just to open it up to the floor again. And the first question is from Councillor McKinney, who has a question for the DFA representative. So, Councillor McKinney, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. It's just, what is a geotechnical activities and certificate GG 142 DMRB? Do you hear me all right?
Councillor McKinney, I can't. Sorry, you faded away. What was that again? If you
Okay, yes, sorry.
Try that again, Philip, please.
Yes, certainly, Chair. Thank you. A DFI Geotechnical Activity Certificate GG 142 DMRB. I don't really know what that is.
That is it's a design standard. I'm going to have to defer to my colleague here, actually, because I haven't got I'm working on one screen. What condition are you talking about, if you wouldn't mind?
Mr. McKinney, DFA rep's asking which particular condition you're referring to.
It was a letter from DFI, Chair, I seen in the pack. I think it was number 14. They asked for the certificate. I'm just concerned. I just don't know what it is. I just would like to be enlightened, if I could, please.
Right. So I don't have the pack that I don't have the pack that you would refer to. Can I ask you one more question? What would the date be on that? And I might have it here.
Hold on one second. I'll just get a few minutes. It was the 27th of October this year.
27th of October this year.
I think it was para 14, item number 14 on it.
So, Councillor McKinney, the 27th of October this year, is that correct?
That is correct, Chair. I'm just trying to bring it up myself here. and I'm only working
Okay,
off
in
one
order to
screen.
give it, well, Councillor McKinney, in order for me to give the DFA representative an opportunity to answer, of course, they're probably referring to a bundle in front of them. So I'll afford the DFA rep an opportunity to have a look through that. And in the meantime, I'll take any further questions for officers, and perhaps then the DFA rep can come back to us with an answer to you. So, members, any other questions for the officers here? Councillor Mooney, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I'm trying to think what I was thinking there before. I got it now. I was just listening to Mr. McAteer there and both the officer and Mr. McAteer, but I was just seeking clarification, maybe perhaps from the legal officer, on the basis of 9 means toying with an idea of maybe a deferral to allow the applicant and officers and other parties involved to come to some agreement, or to try and come to some agreement on the issue of conditions 24, 25 and 26. Now, at first blush, when I read them in 10 years, my initial reaction was that these are deathly onerous. Somebody to maybe, even picking it further, to me it looked like, at some level, you're asking a developer, an applicant, to actually subvent TransLink of some sort to try and establish a route in that area. But aside from that there, my view would be obviously that we've come so far in this application, it's 3 or 4 years to go now. And I would like to see finality achieved, and I'm sure other members would as well. But would it be preferable to have a deferral now, and maybe with the object of trying to agree or secure Section 76? Obviously, in practice, it seems that Section 76 are always done beforehand, prior to any applications going forward. But my understanding does that it doesn't necessarily have to happen that way. And would it be preferable to have it done, if there was to be a deferral proposal put forward, would it be preferable to have it done before outline planning permission is granted? Or could outline planning permission be granted and then subject to the applicant and officers and all respective parties sitting down and perhaps agreeing a way forward on those 3 particular conditions that seem to be in play at the moment? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mooney. So that was a question for City Solicitor. If you would wish to advise on that, yeah? You okay to do so?
Or anybody.
Yeah. Councillor Mooney, I'll pass it to the City Solicitor, and I think the head of planning could probably come back to you on that too.
Yeah. Deferral is obviously a matter for members to consider in relation to the matter. Section 76 agreements, as members are well aware, we've dealt with a number of them in relation to major developments. We have tended to deal with those prior to the issue of outline permission, because that is in accordance with the guidance that has been issued in relation to issue of Section 76 agreements by the department in relation to the matter. That is guidance. The statutory position is that there is more flexibility in and around the issue of Section 76 agreements, but certainly it's preferable to deal with them before the issue of planning permission to make sure that everybody knows exactly the basis upon which the planning permission is issued, and so as, for example, we're not getting to a stage where if a property is occupied in advance of a Section 76 agreement being issued, that we're not then in a position whereby enforcement proceedings are having to be issued on the occupier of the property, for example, which is, as members have already articulated today, is not a position that is ideal by any stretch of the imagination. So certainly deferral matter for members. Section 76 agreements, preferred course of action is to deal with them in advance of the issue of the outline permission. Yeah, I think that's.
Thanks, Chair, for letting me in. Yeah, I would just concur with what Philip said in terms of practice and consistency, and would be strongly recommending that members would negotiate the Section 76 before it would issue permission. So that would be my advice, if that's what you're looking for. Thanks.
Okay, so content with those answers, Councillor Mooney? Thank you. Okay. Does our DFI person have an answer to that question yet?
I do, Chair.
Go
Are you
ahead.
happy for me to come in now?
Yes, please.
Geotechnical condition, yeah, you're right. In our draft condition, at first reserved matters are first full application. And before any works commence on site, the detailed design of any geotechnical activities which require geotechnical certification shall be submitted to the planning authority and approved. That is a standard condition we provide mainly at outline stage, but not restricted to, because there is no requirement to go into the detail of the site internals. But once we get into reserve matters, or if it converts to a full application, and the road and infrastructure, footways, cycleways, any other element of the reserve matters street layout that will be adopted by DFI roads, if it comes up and through the ground investigations that geotechnical certification or investigation is required, then that covers that, and that will be taken forward by the applicant's site investigation team and their agent team.
Thank you. And if you could just stay there. We also have another question for DFI from Councillor Raymond Barr. Councillor Barr.
Thank you, Chair. It's just again on the TransLink thing, you know, it's my own opinion that if this were to become a statutory requirement, I would think.
Councillor Barr, I've just got to advise you. I'm not sure what the sound is like for the DFI person, but nobody in this chamber can hear you. Can you maybe have a look at your microphone situation?
What's that now?
Seems to be better, Raymond. Go ahead.
No, it's just on the TransLink thing again, you know, it's something I've never heard of before, you know, and it's my own thoughts that if this were to become a statutory requirement, I would think of a very impact on the demand for housing, given the financial burden of placing developers. I would just like to ask the representative there from the DFI is on what basis is this condition imposed?
Yeah, happy to answer that, Councillor Barr. It's the condition would have first been put to planning officers and the agent team in April of this year. It might have been put before that, and it's been on the portal since then. And we have used them, and we use them more frequently now. And to answer your question, on what basis? It's a mitigation towards the transport impact of the development. And the particular mitigation in this stage is that, in this case, is that TransLink will extend their service in and through the development. And that's done by means of this contribution. And it will, rather than just, it's a means as well that as part of that contribution, TransLink are content to issue a TransLink card to each dwelling in the development for a period of time. And that gives a benefit to the occupants themselves, that there's a bus trip, you know, there's a card for the house that an occupant can use for bus travel. Now I would refer back to the £7.5 million that the applicant referred to in his presentation. That's not correct. We'll be happy to answer each of the applicant's points in his direct correspondence to it as soon as we have come out of committee. But yes, we have some correspondence to answer to the applicant, but the £7.5 million is incorrect. It's calculated with TransLink on the basis of extending the scheme and how it translates to provision of what is known currently as a foil metro card, but will convert over the next year to what's called a TransLink card, which is a stored value card. So in short, it's a mitigation to account for extending the service into the site for a period of time, and as soon and hopefully it will become feasible to maintain it permanently.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Barr, yep.
Yes, Chair, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Barr. Okay, Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you, Chair. And I'll go back to, again, there was something that Sarah said in her presentation. Look, these these three conditions, 24, 25, and 26, seem to be, the major bone of contention out of the 54, I think it is, which in itself is a lot. But it was around the section 76, and if I've heard Sarah right, Sarah says that officers wouldn't engage around the conversation, section 76, and it was because officers felt that the scheme was outside the housing zone. Was the reason for not engaging? Was that right?
Yeah, in normal circumstances, yeah, with schemes of this scale, we've indicated that in the late item. If you see the information that Sarah passed on the 26th of October, is that in normal circumstances or applications of this scale, that in the past we have been engaging with developers, one or two, depending on how many landowners there are on the site, in order to address infrastructure requirements, whether that be open space, whether that be matters such as community buildings, all those matters that obviously are referred to in this application. We would do that at the outset, but because in principle this was outside the development limit, clearly officers and still are recommending refusal for the application. So if, we're at this point, it is obviously a section 76 would be something that we would work through, with the developers through. That's an application that's in zoned land inside the development limit. So in some respects, yes, that would be the position, but we weren't in that situation with this planning application.
Right.
Just what I'm trying to get at maybe is in the sense of, if the developer's saying that before they begin or whatever, they're happy to engage in an agreed travel plan, that's what they're saying that they will do. If section 76 is working to that, can we not just remove the bone of contention and put on that as a condition and say, get an agreed travel plan? Is that not?
I think we
Take a little ahead of plan and answer that.
I think we already covered that in answer to Councillor Mooney's question earlier, in regard to our advice about section 76s and how to apply them. But that would remain to be the case, that it wouldn't be appropriate to use a condition to do it afterwards. You need to negotiate and agree the section 76 in advance of issuing the planning permission.
Probably fair to get the 76 in place and then bring it back to grant out a line for sure.
Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Chair. And I think we can all agree that the ideal scenario is that the section 76 would have been agreed prior, and when the committee's taking a decision, they would be taking a decision with all that information in front of them. Unfortunately, we're not in that position in relation to this application. But just on the subject of travel cards, and because it did feature as part of the discussion in relation to a previous application on the H30 lands in the waterside, and I think it was referred to by Mr. McAteer. And I suppose this question is either directed towards Sarah or Lorraine, whoever's best placed to answer it. Because I know that application, there was, on the H30 lands, there was various applications that came before this committee. And the first application, there was, I'm assuming it was in the form of a section 76 agreement where travel cards would be provided. Subsequent applications came forward where that condition or agreement had been relaxed somewhat, and it said that travel cards would be provided on a first come, first served basis. And that's and it was very, very clearly stated that there was a limited number of travel cards made available for the future residents of the H30 zonings as part of that application. Now, I just see a completely different approach in relation to this one, and I just wouldn't mind a wee bit of clarity around why we're taking a different approach. And maybe just referring back to some of the comments that have been made by members of the committee. This application, we took a decision at this committee in relation to this application. We've seen delays in having that decision being implemented. We've had the very welcome news that the minister has accepted and agreed that this committee has the right to take decisions. That we were right to take the decision that we had taken. I would be very keen to avoid any further delays because the social housing need in this city is going through the roof. It's been through the roof for some time. The thousands of people that are waiting for a roof over their heads, they can't afford to wait. And and particularly in the basis of a travel card, when we've got a willingness, an indication of a willingness from a developer's agent that they want to come to an agreed position on this, I would be very reluctant to support a deferral and delay these much needed homes any further than it's already been done. But just a wee bit of clarity around the different approaches in relation to the travel card issue. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. And Sarah, if you want to take that question.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Jackson, the Section 76 relating to the Hitch Study zoned lands was agreed during the outline application stage and it was signed in September 2019. So this legal agreement included provision for public transport, for the public transport to be extended on the site, and there was also the offer of a travel card. So the travel card agreement between TransLink and the developer is appended to the Section 76 legal agreement. Just to advise that there was no relaxed approach in terms of the reserved matters application. So the Section 76 relating to Hitch 30 is statutory charged to the land. So the reserved matters applications are also subject to the same obligations of the agreement that was agreed at outline stage. There was no relaxed position, but that is the travel card agreement was that it was on a first come, first served basis.
Okay. Yeah, Councillor Barr, I note in the chat box that you might have a proposal, but I'm going to work through questions here first. So, Councillor Gallagher, another question? Yeah.
So it's probably a legal one, you know, for the solicitor, I think, just in around what's coming to me in the sense of, you know, like as a condition and it's becoming like illegal enforcement. And whatever, 5, 10, whatever years, right? And for example, you create this development and you create it and you may have double parking, you might have two cars to the house. And this condition is saying you must submit numbers on a yearly basis, blah, blah, blah. What if there was no take-up? No, the travel card wasn't getting used. People saying, I'm my car, I'm away. And there was no use of the card. You know, how would be the legal enforcement that you would keep in more as over a 10-year period? So you'd be saying, I don't, whatever, there's costs there. But just say, for example, you're buying 100 cards and the 100 cards won't get used because they were using cars. So what I'm talking about is probably the legal enforcement. That we'd be enforcing the purchase of these cards on a yearly basis and they might not be taken up. So is there a guarantee these cards won't be taken up in the first place? Just as a legal?
Okay, I'm not sure anybody has an answer to that, but I'm certainly, you've put it across.
The point,
just
for
point
clarity, Chair, is if we're imposing it as a condition and it's maybe, it could have the potential that it couldn't be delivered, therefore it couldn't be enforced. That's the point I'm making.
Yeah, I understand. Just before I bring in the city solicitor and that as well, and I just asked the FA as well, just to clear up something here, because there's been a bit of chat about 10 years and 5 years. And as I understood it, it has now been agreed that this would be 5 years. Is that correct?
Chair, that's correct. The condition, we had a discussion with TransLink, and they're content that 5 years is sufficient. And just to answer another point on that, from our point of view, because we've provided for our legal advice from DSO, those conditions are preferable over agreements because they're easier to enforce, and that's why we have been able to provide definite conditions and specific conditions. And sorry, I would take the liberty of answering Councillor Gallagher's question there before the city solicitor, in that the travel card is a means of paying TransLink to extend the service. The benefit is that the cards will be issued to dwellings to use. I take your point about they may not be taken up, but it's more to secure the payment to TransLink to extend the service. Hopefully that answers your query, Chair.
Thank you. That was funny, just before I move on. That was what I was wondering about as well, was these sorts of schemes, and it's a question to the officer as well as yourself. These sorts of schemes and these sorts of incentives that are put in, that are conditioned, are effectively to incentivize, is this correct, to incentivize TransLink to extend services to what would be new developments, and that potentially without that incentive for TransLink, then that they may well choose not to extend their service into the new developments that we're approving going forward. Can you explain that maybe a little bit more for me? And then for the officer as well, in terms of what's going forward in the system, do we see much yet more evidence of these sort of travel schemes being introduced? I can see some evidence of some, but potentially are there others that this is germane to as well?
Sorry, do you want me to answer that myself or
yeah, if you could, yes, please.
No problem. You're perfectly right. The payment is to allow TransLink, or to pay for TransLink to extend the service, and the travel cards will incentivise the occupants to use the service and build up and build on the greener and public transport habit to come away from private vehicles and use public transport as far as practicable for their journeys. Yes, we do, in the main, for major housing applications, look at these mitigations. And in the zoned lands throughout the city, you'll remember historically H1BC, H1B at Skeg, H2, and now I've run out of H's, all have what used to be known as Article 40, 122 joint agreements, where these contributions were calculated and paid through those agreements. The difference between
I think you're trying to answer the second half of my question, yeah, which was more to officers, Lorraine, to be fair.
Oh, sorry. Excuse me. What was your first? Can I ask you what your first part was again?
No, I'm content with your answer to the first one. So effectively, I suppose your answer was yes, of course, it's to try and incentivise public transport into new developments. Okay. And officers, I'm sure, have taken note of that question. Members, any other questions to the officers? Councillor Jackson.
Chair, thanks. And I think we had, in relation to promoting and encouraging sustainable forms of transport, the benefit of travel cards, I suppose, isn't up for discussion here. I think everybody's in agreement that travel cards, particularly in new developments, can help encourage people to use more sustainable forms of transport. And I think that's where I'm thinking back to the H30 applications, because I seen that as a huge positive around reducing the levels of traffic and reducing the impact that application would have on the road infrastructure in the waterside area. So there's the benefits of a travel card sort of have been well rehearsed. My concern is in relation to the different approach, and this is because, unless I'm wrong, the suggestion that's conditioned within this report is that every house should a travel card should be issued to every house that's been built as in relation to this application. Now, when I'm referring back to the H30 ones, we were very clearly told that it's on a first come, first served basis. There's a limited number of travel cards, and that it certainly won't go anywhere near covering every household that would be part of that overall zoning. So I would just want a wee bit of clarity around a consistent approach, and is it appropriate, or how do we get to having a similar type arrangement in relation to this application? And if the answer is that it's a Section 76, then that's what it is. But I just think we're maybe getting a wee bit distracted around talking around the benefits of a travel card. We know what the benefits of a travel card is. I just want to see a consistent approach applied to all applications that come before this committee. And in relation to this one, I do see differences, and that's something that I would like to see addressed. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Jackson. I don't disagree with you. Everybody knows the benefits of the travel cards and how they incentivise people to use public transport. I think the narrative around that was trying to understand how it is that it encourages the transport companies to provide services into areas. That's what I was driving at. So are there any further questions from members to officers? And then I'm going to give the officers an opportunity to answer some of these questions. Councillor Gallagher?
And look, I didn't hear back from Philip on mine, in particular. Sorry? Yes. Oh, right. Okay, I thought you were just wrapping up there, but do I have thought about that? But and it goes back, and I'll take it back to the conditions and all the rest, right? And the value of travel cards has been outlined. But there's also like, and the stuff around enforcement. And then there's also the stuff around how we'll just go, right, travel card to everybody, 10 years, everybody around. There's that element, one, and how then that is managed and worked on, and two, how is it enforced and is it legal, right? And then around when you switch that to our side and saying, let's agree a solution. Let's, whoever it is, the developer, TransLink, central government have a role in this around their transport strategy, around rural access and all that. So there's an element of saying, let's get an agreed strategy, which the developer is saying, we'll do that before we cut us out. Seems to me very logical, that before there's anything in place, there's an agreed strategy. And it's agreed all round before anything happens. Whereas when we're talking now, are we talking 10, are we talking 5, are we talking enormous costs of whatever it happens to be, right? There's even disagreement what that is. But that's an enforcement. Instead of saying, let's get an agreed strategy. So I think that, and it's good to have this discussion, but I think that we're having a negative discussion around the potential of walking away from all this, saying we're not doing this, no, right? And we lose 200 odd houses that are much needed in this area. So I'll look back to the legal status around enforcing this and saying, Councillor Jackson says there's value in travel cards. Is there value on imposing this as a condition, just scattergun across the board? Doesn't seem logical to me, but.
Thanks, Councillor Gallagher. I think, you know, effectively what you're talking about there is a Section 76 type arrangement. That's how you get to that position, as I understand it, certainly. That's how you get that position. That's where you actually get the horse in front of the cart again, in a sense. So I think, City Solicitor, if you understand where Councillor Gallagher's come from, if you'd like to address that one first. There are other questions to the officers as well that I'm going to give them the opportunity to answer now, members.
So I think the question that's coming from Councillor Gallagher is whether or not this would be enforceable as a condition. And the position in relation to that is that we believe that it would be enforceable as a condition. 6 tests would be met. Members are familiar with the 6 tests. They apply to every single planning condition that has been imposed by this planning committee since planning powers were transferred in 2015. So, we're quite content that this would be an enforceable condition. The way forward in relation to this, as to how we take this matter forward, as was outlined by Sarah at the start, is a matter for you. It's a matter for elected members. There are options which are available to you. The options are by way of condition. And the conditions have been brought to you here today because with the conditions imposed, the outline planning permission issues straight away. Officers are well aware that members are desirous to get this permission out the door as quickly as they possibly can. Conditions satisfies that. Other options that are available to you is by way of a Section 76 agreement, which requires agreement between, you know, the council and the developer as to what ultimately will be included within that Section 76 agreement. And then the decision that falls to elected members is as to when that Section 76 agreement must be agreed by. The position that has always been adopted by this council to date has been that the Section 76 agreement is agreed before the outline planning permission issues. But that is not a statutory obligation. It is something which is required by guidance, which is issued by the department. And if members wish to move on from that, they can. I have to say, it seems to me a slightly strange situation that we would be sitting potentially with houses constructed but unable to be occupied because it was impossible to agree a position in relation to a Section 76 agreement. So my view, and I would have thought the view of this committee would be that a Section 76 agreement should be finalised at the earliest possible opportunity to finalise it. But members, let's be quite clear, this is your decision in relation to this. So we as officers are putting to you options as to how you may proceed in relation to this matter, and the decision ultimately falls to you, and we will implement whatever decision you make in relation to this, because we are quite clear that the position in relation to this, members, we've heard it loud and clear from you members. You want this development to go ahead, and you want this development to go ahead as quickly as possible. Now, we've heard that, and that is why this application comes forward to you today with the potential for conditions in relation to this matter. It's been brought to you at the earliest possible opportunity that it could be by officers. It was perfectly possible that we would sit with this and bring it to January, February committee with lengthy discussions in and around this. We wanted to get this before you, so as you could make the decision in relation to it at the earliest possible opportunity. And all we're doing today is giving you options as to how you wish to proceed, how you may wish to proceed. But as I say, the options are issue with the conditions, and we see what comes of that. Engage in relation to a Section 76 agreement, which certainly we can do, and we can do that. And you, as members, will determine at what time that Section 76 agreement must be entered into, whether you stick with the position that you've always adopted in relation to applications up until now, or whether you decide to move on from that to another alternative, whether it's prior to issue reserved matters, whether it's prior to issue of outline permission, whether it's prior to commencement of development, or whether it's prior to occupation. It's entirely a matter for you members. we will work with whatever you decide you're going to give us, whether we like it or not.
Thank you, Philip, for that contribution. Members, there were a number of questions to the officers, so I think it's only fair now that we take those and see what the answers are, shake it out and see what comes back. So, Sarah, do you want to take some of those questions? Yeah.
I didn't answer them in the correct order, but there was a question from Councillor Jackson about I suppose differences between Hitch 30 and how the travel cards have been dealt with under the current application. So the Section 76 legal agreement for Hitch 30 has a TransLink agreement attached as an obligation, okay, to that. Hitch 30, just to point out, is for a housing development of 700 plus dwellings, okay. The agreement between TransLink and the developer, yes, the travel cards were to be on a first come, first served basis, but there was a financial contribution with a maximum value capped at that. Now, the details of that, I wasn't in discussions and with TransLink on that, but it is part of the agreement and there was a maximum value capped to that. So there was another question then, I think it was from Councillor Boyle in relation to other applications, which we have, I suppose, Lorraine tried to answer that we have entered into public transport agreements, travel card agreements, and that is in relation to all the zoned housing lands, Hitch 2, Hitch 25, Hitch 1B, Hitch 1C and Hitch 30. And within our late item information, we've provided details or examples of where we have conditioned smaller developments requiring travel cards where we didn't enter into Section 76 agreement, and where we can deal with the matter by condition, we did condition that through a condition on those examples, and those examples are within your late items. Not sure if they missed any other questions, but.
Okay, so basically, an answer to my question, you're saying that quite a lot of those developments that are coming ahead, that are going ahead now, have as part of their Section 76 this travel plan arrangement in them. In fact, they all do. Is that right? Yeah. So that's it. If there are no other questions for members, I think I heard a proposal from Councillor Mooney initially. There was no proposal from Councillor Mooney. I do see in the chat box that Councillor Raymond Barr suggested that you have a proposal. Raymond, I'll hear that from you now. Oh, sorry, bear with me, Raymond. There's somebody else in the room interrupting. Sorry, Christopher, my apologies. I know you did indicate. Raymond, if you could just bear with me. Go. You sure? Go ahead.
Chair, and
Raymond Barr's been on the chat box.
No, I know he is. I'm just highlighting that in the absence of getting a seconder for either of those proposals, I haven't heard what Raymond's is. I'm prepared to make a proposal as well.
We may or may not get to that one, Councillor Jackson. So, Councillor Barr, I'll hear your proposal now.
Thank you, Chair. Listen to what Councillor Jackson, Councillor Geller said earlier about the need for houses, and I agree completely with their sentiments. And having listened to what Councillor Heaney said as well, I would like to make a proposal. And there doesn't appear to be any legal obstruction to this proposal, but given the length of time that the application's been in the pipeline, I think we all want to see this finalised. So I propose that the application be granted with the caveat that no work commences until discussions have taken place between DFI, TransLink, the developer, and the planners, and that all parties engage immediately.
Councillor Barr, I don't know about anybody else, but I certainly couldn't hear the proposal. Now, if you could repeat it for the benefit of the city solicitor, who will write it down.
Right.
He has an earpiece in, and he can hear loud and clear. It's just the speaker system in this room is letting us down. So again, if you could repeat it for the benefit of the city solicitor, he'll write it down, and then we'll try and put it up somewhere for everybody to have a look at it.
Can you hear me now, John?
Yeah, go ahead, Raymond. Keep trying.
Did you hear anything of what I said there at the last time?
Some people say they heard some of it, so I suppose
Well,
from the top, Raymond, if you can.
I'll start from the start again. I was just saying that I agree completely with what Councillor Jackson and Councillor Gallagher said in terms of the need for social housing. And also what Councillor Heaney said earlier. But given the length of time that the application's been in the pipeline, I would like to make a proposal, and I don't think there's any legal obstruction to the proposal. Can you still hear me? Hello?
Yeah, go ahead, councillor.
Right. I propose that the application be granted with the caveat that no work commences until discussions have taken place between DFI, Translink, the developer and planners, and that all parties engage immediately.
Sorry about that, Councillor Barr. I had to get up from my seat there to go over and stand underneath the PA system to be able to hear you. Members, can you bear with me? Because I'm working with Councillor Barr at the minute. Audio is not great. So just bear with us a second. Go ahead, Councillor Jackson.
Chair, thanks. And I suppose just on the back of the proposal from Councillor Barr, it's on a similar vein. And I suppose that the proposal that I was going to suggest, and what I want a wee bit of clarity, because the proposal that I was going to suggest is that we approve the applications in front of us today, subject to and approve the attached conditions, with the exception of condition 24, 25 and 26. So essentially we're approving the outline the permission for this, and including a condition that any decision on a reserved matters application on this, that a Section 76 agreement must be reached with council, which would take into consideration everything that Councillor Barr has said. No construction can take place on an outline application anyway. So it's just what I was proposing was the exact same outcome of what Councillor Barr has said, but it was just formalising that condition that a Section 76 agreement is reached with council before a decision's taken on a reserved matters application. That's hopefully that helps, but what I was planning to propose was the exact same as what Councillor Barr has suggested.
Okay, Councillor Jackson, thanks for that. Councillor Jackson, I actually didn't hear the proposal. I couldn't hear the proposal, and I'm going to have to take a minute to consult with the city solicitor, who, as far as I can tell, has it written down. I want to be able to see that proposal first before we can come back round to your direction of travel. I'm not necessarily saying you're right or you're wrong. I just don't know. I didn't hear it. Couldn't hear a thing. So, Councillor Jackson, now that I've seen what Councillor Barr was proposing, I better understand now what it is that you're proposing, which is basically to build on that original proposal. Isn't that, that's the case? Isn't that what you're suggesting? Okay. So just for understanding, if I don't understand, it's potentially others don't either, remember. So we've got to try and work these things through. So, Mr. Mooney.
Yeah, thank you for letting me in. Just on that note, I was having the same sort of thoughts myself, and the Councillor Jackson beat me. But with respect to Councillor Barr, I think Councillor Jackson's proposal is a much more refined proposal. It goes straight to the heart of the matter. I think on that basis that, you know, if it goes that way, I could live with that there on the basis we go grant outline. But any any agreement must be in place prior to reserved matters. So on that basis, I'd be happy to support Councillor Jackson's motion.
Okay. Okay. Oh, right. Thank you, Councillor Barr. Noted. Members, Head of Planning wants to just address some matters here in relation to this before we do progress forward. I understand where everybody's coming from, and I know people are in solution finding mode. That's absolutely what we're here for as well. So, Maura.
Thank you. In terms of the proposal, that basically we would put a condition on that would mean that prior to any application or reserved matter application being submitted, that Section 76 would be agreed. We can't stop anyone submitting a planning application. You know, so, but that is that is what the proposal would mean. That, you know, we, from what I heard anyway, that was what it would mean. So I'm just highlighting that we can't stop anyone submitting a planning application. But it may be, you know, you're saying we can't, you know, but we're obliged once an application is a system and the system to progress it. So, you know, if there's no legal obligation on the land before that matter, then applications will be processed in a normal manner. And there's just a second point that I didn't get an opportunity to say when we were discussing the conditions previously, is that all members need to be aware that all conditions can be appealed separately, you know, outside a decision notice being issued, if members are to go down that route as well, that is afforded to the applicant if they're not happy with specific conditions. It was just something that I wanted to come in before you left, but apologies, I never got the chance. Thanks.
Right, Maura, thanks for that. Christopher, I think you want to just come in and clear a few things up there. Yeah.
Just for clarity, what I was proposing was the condition added that a Section 76 agreement is agreed with council before any decision is taken on a reserved matters. So it wasn't until any reserved matters application is accepted. It's until a decision is taken on a reserved matters application.
Okey-dokes. Well, thanks for that, Councillor Jackson.
Chair, I'll second his.
And Councillor Gallagher, thank you very much. You have seconded that particular proposal. So is everybody content that they understand what it is that we're voting on here? If you aren't, please indicate in the chat box. Okay, members, on advice, I'm going to take a 2-minute recess here, okay? Okay, members, thanks everybody online. Sorry for that short delay. There's a proposal that we had to get written up for everybody to see so there can be no doubt in anybody's mind as to what it is that they're voting for or voting against. So I'll just ask committee section if we could see that proposal up on the screen for members to consider. Okay, and we'll read this under the record for the benefit. So the proposal is no development shall take place on the application site until a Section 76 planning agreement to include provision for sustainable public transport measures has been agreed and entered into with the planning authority. The reason in the interest of promoting public transport and reducing reliance on the private car. Okay, members, so I'm putting that to the floor. And we are going to obviously take for the record again, we're going to record that vote because some members are in the chamber and some are not. Okay, so we have a proposal from Councillor Jackson and I need a seconder. You're seconding that. You're needing more clarification. Sorry, bear with me, Councillor Gallagher as the proposer. Councillor Jackson.
No, just clarity on the proposal is the approve the application, outline application in front of us. They accept the conditions that were suggested, with the exception of the 24, 25 and 26 and the inclusion of this new condition. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you for clearing that up for us, Councillor Jackson. I was working on the presumption everybody understood that, but again, there you go. Okay, so having noted what Councillor Jackson has said, what has been seconded by Councillor Gallagher, I'm now going to ask the head of planning to put it to the vote.
Thanks, Chair. Remember, this is item 1. Alderman Alan Breslin.
Against.
Alderman Keith Kerrigan.
Against, Mara.
Thank you. Alderman Graham Wark.
That's Alderman Thompson, Mara.
Alderman Thompson, Mara.
Sorry, someone's given me the wrong recorded sheet here. Highlighted, apologies.
Alderman Thompson.
Yeah, I've given they've highlighted the wrong names here for planning committee. Alderman Thompson.
Against.
Councillor Jason Barr.
For.
Councillor Raymond Barr. Councillor Raymond Barr. I'll come back. Councillor John Boyle.
Against.
Councillor Angela Dobbins. Councillor Paul Gallagher.
For.
Okay. Councillor Christopher Jackson.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Dan Kelly.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Patricia Logue.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Kieran Maguire. Not here. Councillor Philip McKinney.
For.
Councillor,
For.
thank you. Councillor Sean Mooney.
For.
Thank you. Just double check. Councillor Raymond Barr.
Can you hear me now, Mara?
Yes.
For.
Thank you. And Councillor Angela Dobbins. Councillor's there. Okay. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Maura. Thank you, members. So, members, the result of that vote is that there are 8 for the proposal in front of you and 4 against. So the proposal is carried. Members, thank you for your attention to that. Thank you, Mr. McAteer, for joining us again today. Wish you well with it going forward into the future. And looking forward to your working alongside the officer team here to sort out the various intricacies of the application as it will be through the years. Hopefully not too difficult. So members, I'm suggesting now we take a 10-minute break. Officers need a break. I need a break. I'm sure some of you need a break too. So again, we'll come back about 20 to 5 or so. Okay.
Test.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks everybody for your patience. Just going to require a little bit more patience from those here online and looking to present to us. The next application is application number 3 on our for decision list. That's LA 11 2022 0169F. However, again, as I suggested at the start of the meeting, there are some late items that come in. I'm going to give everybody about 5 minutes. I don't think it should require much more than that. So we're going to take 5 minutes now, and then we will go straight to the officer report. Okay. Everybody content to move on? Yep. Okay, members. So as outlined now, application 3 for decision. Bear with me. L11 2022-0169F, retention of rear dormer, extension to dwelling, etc. And Suzanne, if you'd like to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, members, so it's item 3, LA11 2022-0169F. It's retention of rear dormer extension to dwelling and retention of amendments to elevations of previously approved applications. LA11 2019-0317F and LA11 2021-0092F. So members, this application, you'll recall, was scheduled for committee on the 5th of October. And it was deferred for a site visit, which was held on the 13th of October, and that's noted in your report. So this is a site location plan of the, you can't really see on the screen, it's probably better on your own screens, of the site. It's 20 Maybrook Mews. It's an existing semi-detached dwelling. The character of the area is urban in context. This is the existing front elevation of the house that has been altered. And these are some photos of the rear extension which form the subject of the application. We've also included photos looking out just towards 36 St Francis Terrace, looking in from 36 St Francis Terrace, just to give you a bit of context for those of you who maybe weren't on the site visit. Again, this is a view from 34 St Francis Terrace. Again, from 34 St Francis Terrace. So this site actually has planning history. There's 2 previous planning applications, L11 2021-0092, and that was for extension and alterations, and then L11 2019-0317. F, again, there was a non-material change submitted for the box dormer that's being constructed at the back of the house, but it was considered not to be an acceptable minor amendment, and obviously then this application was submitted. So just taking you back to the original history, here on the left you can see, top right, you can see the original front elevation. So it was a semi-detached dwelling with a garage, and then back on that application, extension and alterations were approved. You'll see there, and removing the garage obviously and extending the dwelling to the front, and you can see the rear elevation. Then a further application was submitted in 2021-0092, which introduced a front projection, further amendments to the front elevation, and a rear extension, a sort of a stepped rear extension. If you can see my cursor here on the screen, ground floor extension out to almost the boundary, and then a first floor extension step back in. And then obviously the current application is to retain what has been constructed, which is not in accordance with the approved plans, okay? And the main changes being the construction of a large box dormer on the rear elevation. And the ground floor and first floor extension are built slightly higher than what were previously approved. Those are just the side elevations. Just to give you a bit of context in terms of the second one there just shows the stepped out, and the one on the left shows really just, you know, that's a patio door looking into the applicant's backyard. It's just a proposed ground floor plan. So in terms of the policy context, there were no statutory consultees required to be consulted on. The policy context listed in your report and summarised on the screen. So clearly the main policy consideration is PPS 7 EXT1. There have been 17 letters of support submitted, which are outlined in your report. Varying comments, you know, that it's you know, no effect on daylight, house in general is a great addition to the street. There have been also 11 letters of objection received from 2 individual objectors, with a range of issues being considered. And obviously we have a couple of late objections today, and then also a submission from the applicant. In terms of the objections, really, there's issues in terms of the scale of the proposal, overdevelopment, unauthorised encroachment beyond boundaries. So we have summarised and we've addressed those and responded to those in the report. The applicant has submitted a design statement sort of setting out the reasoning for, you know, their proposal, their development, which is also included in your report. So don't propose to go into this in detail. And I'm just see here. So really then just looking at the planning assessment. So the dormer roof extension, which is the main issue that officers have an issue with in terms of the policy. The box dormer, you know, and the critical issue is when it's viewed from St Francis Terrace. It's considered the large box dormer dominates the outward views and is therefore considered the proposal as contrary to EXT1. The box dormer does include a bathroom window, a light well window and a bedroom window. And there is quite a lot of provision in PPS 7 that, you know, that preserves residential amenity, and one of the considerations is dominance. And it's quite, you know, in quite a dense urban context like this, it's really important that we would consider dominance and the views of neighbouring properties, especially from their private areas. So just moving on there, obviously there have been a number of previous approvals on this, and we're now looking at, you know, slight increases in terms of the height of the rear elevation that's been constructed, and the distance is changed. However, you know, officers' view is what has been approved on the plans is really the limit of what would be acceptable here in terms of development on this site. And we feel that the further provision of the box dormer is actually, you know, taking this to an unacceptable situation in terms of residential amenity. The other alterations that have been carried out and that are being applied to be retained are the amended materials. Obviously there's the retention of Staffordshire blue brick and zinc cladding to match the colour of the windows. Officers consider in the urban context those would be acceptable. The alterations to the front elevation are acceptable to the visual and residential amenity of the area. And so really, you know, the issue really were taken forward, and it was very, very clear, I suppose, at the site visit that day is in relation to the box dormer. So what I've done here is, these are photos submitted by one of the objectors and circulated in your packs. I've just copied them into the presentation. So this is the box dormer here. That was, so the previous application, that was just a normal pitched roof with Felix in it. And this is the view from 36 St Francis Terrace, I think it is. And you can see there it is. It is quite large. It is quite dominant. That existing story and a half extension to the right is approved. However, that has no, you'll see there my icon to the right there, you'll see there's no windows in that elevation. But to increase and to continue that along the full width of the rear elevation, officers feel it's excessive and will result in an overbearing and a hemming in relation to the existing properties at 34 and 36 St Francis Terrace. Again, this is from the private garden area. This is a sunroom. And then, you know, you can obviously see the garden area there as well. So in looking at the late information, we've got the photos, obviously. We also have a letter from 34 St Francis Terrace. And I know we have a speaker from that property today. The issues raised in that are really to do with the plans that have been submitted, and we have been engaged in quite a considerable amount of correspondence with this neighbour. officers are clear that the plans that are currently being proposed do accurately reflect the existing property on the ground. That's our assessment. There's issues being raised that the scale's incorrect, and also summarising that basically I request that the proposal of retention of amendments to elevations of previously approved application will be deferred until I can submit a more detailed objection when I get to view the drawings which accompanied the PhD application. Mr. Downey has viewed the current plans on a number of occasions, and most recently on the 23rd of September, I think, was actually given a copy of the plans. So there's been a number of extensive issues that have been raised in terms of residential amenity. Officers consider that those are valid planning concerns and have taken those on board. And we've given weight, in terms of the objectors' concerns. And we've also considered that, yes, it is contrary to policy. The applicant then, Mr. Campbell, has also submitted considerable information which you have been circulated as well, showing issues such as context of the area, the issues to do with light, and then obviously contesting the policy interpretation. Officers have no issue here in terms of loss of light. The issue here is purely the scale and the overbearing and the dominance of the rear return. The policy does clearly consider that in some cases overbearing can cause loss of light, but that is not what officers are saying in this report. And our planning judgment in this, I think, is quite clear as part of the report. So as a consequence, members, we've recommended refusal. And we also, sorry, just to double check, we also have speaking notes that from Breach O'Donnell, which are now circulated as late item because they're not going to speak. Again, issues in terms of the plans, the accuracy of the plans. I would advise members that as an officer team with myself, Malachy, and the case officer, we believe that the plans that have been submitted accurately reflect what's been proposed to be retained. In terms of the issue with the applicant's wife being a council employee, this application has been considered by the planning committee. That's not a material consideration in terms of this. And again, in terms of the older application that was approved, LA 11 2019 or 2021. That is an approved application, but officers contend that application hasn't been implemented. It hasn't been constructed in accordance with the plans. So we're currently dealing with what's in front of us today to be retained, and we clearly consider there are issues here in terms of overbearing and dominance as really as a result of overdevelopment. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Okay, members, we have an objector who wishes to address the committee, and we also have the applicant who again also wishes to address the committee. And as is the normal order of things, I'd like to welcome Louise Farrelly, who is one of the objectors, certainly. So Louise, you're very welcome. The normal run of things here is that you have 5 minutes to address the committee. Louise, can I just ask, are you hearing me okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, that's a wee sound check for us. So Louise, whenever you're comfortable to start, we're content to hear from you, so go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. All I want to say is I am pleased that the planning officers have recommended refusal of this application. The proposed scale and massing of that box dormer is overbearing and dominant, and I think you can see, for those who went on the site visit can see that. In order to supplement the planning report, I did attach those further pictures which show the extent of the proposed box dormer and how it impinges on the immediate aspect and outlook, from number 36. And I think they help you visualize the scale and massing of that extension. Photographs 1 and 4 are taken from the garden and illustrate how inescapably dominant that box dormer is in all directions. You can't get away from it. As indicated in the planning report, neighbours should not be adversely affected by a sense of being hemmed in by the extension, and I think that is shown there. Photograph 2 is taken from the kitchen window, so that's what we're looking out on, and number 3 is taken from the living room conservatory where we sit, and they show how the structure is overbearing and intrusive. That's not even to mention the loss of privacy in that. It's difficult to portray the sense of oppressiveness of the structure has when you're inside. You weren't able to go, obviously because of COVID restrictions, you weren't able to go inside, our home to see it from the inside, which is even worse. From entering the front door of our home, you see it immediately because we've got a glass door from the hall leading into the kitchen, and you can see it immediately. And you become acutely aware of how dominant it is and overbearing and intrusive. This affects the whole house, or basically the whole house, because it's the kitchen, the living room, the conservatory, and it's just the sense of being hemmed in and oppressiveness of it, of the size of it. I'm sure you can see that from the photographs, and I just welcome that the planners have recommended refusal of this. Thank you. That's all I want to say.
Hey, Louise. Members, anybody got any questions for Louise? Thanks for here. Anybody online got any questions for Ms. Farley? Okay, Louise, thanks for addressing the committee. Of course, do stay with us. And again, now I have the opportunity to welcome the applicant, Mr. Kevin Campbell. Kevin, again, extend a welcome to you. As I said, explained before, the normal run of things here is that you also will have 5 minutes to address the committee. So you're very welcome, and I invite you now to take your opportunity here in front of the committee.
Thank you. I'm just checking. Can you hear me all? Yeah.
That's kind of so. If there's any way you can turn your audio up, it might be a wee bit better.
That's at 100% now. Can you hear me? Yeah.
I think we can. Go ahead.
So can I present my screen, or is that allowed? Or
Unfortunately, the capacity to do that, the opportunity to do that, you would have had to have arranged in advance. Kevin, so that can't be done at this point. But we do have your late information, and members have had an opportunity to look at it.
Yeah. So yeah, obviously my name is Kevin Campbell. I'm the owner, and I'm an architect at the property, along with my wife Shauna and my 2 young children. Because of the limited talking time, I'm going to talk about the main recommendation for refusal, overbearing and dominant that relates to the dormer at the back of the house. Again, we are a working class couple and find it difficult to find a new house. The house is beside my mother, who has MS and elderly aunts, so we can look after them, but at the same time try and allow them to maintain their independence. We use the passive house standard to make our home as energy efficient as possible, investing all our money to do our bit for climate change. Survey of the city, and this is a big point that I want to make here in terms of obviously backyard views. Is I've surveyed the city now, and it's very clear to see in image 2 and 3 below, which I'll show you. There's larger extensions to the back of houses, closer to the boundaries. There's windows that overlook neighbouring properties. There's houses that are closer together. All of the above have gained full planning permission. So what I'm trying to say here is, in isolation, obviously the panel has come down and looked at my backyard, but if they went round the rest of the city and looked at all our backyards, you would see 2-story extensions. You would actually see extensions that are closer to the boundary. This dormer is actually a flat roof. on a bungalow, if you put it into context. So it's a really got a small height to it. In terms of if you look at the images, say in Pennyburn, there's housing develops around Pennyburn. There's one actually over in Pennyburn Court there, and you'll actually see yourself that the houses are only 4 or 5 meters apart, and the windows are looking into each other. So there's precedent all around the town of houses closer together. If you look at the section yourself, the photograph, the section yourself, the even title page, you can see actually, if you're talking about dominance, you can see actually the difference in height from number 34 and number 36 in terms of its composition and size, and how small number 20 is against it. So, like, again, I've shown images there from all our estates around the town, and there's back extensions everywhere. You go to Cairn Hall, Hapmore, there's all extensions up against the boundary. So there's really, like, this, my extension actually is a 1-story extension, slightly step back from the boundary, and then it steps back then to a 2-story flat roof extension, and then the dormer itself is stepped back again, and then the ridge is above that. So the dormer is actually 1 meter below a ridge on a bungalow. So it's not a big development. So again, I understand what the planner is saying about light and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, dominance and overbearing can come across as being hearsay. Anybody can say something's dominant or overbearing. You have to prove it. So I've talked here about architects can base results on personal opinion, but objections that you hear in plan disputes are based merely on personal opinion, sometimes with no evidence to back it up. Professionals, doctors, structural engineers, etc., need to have results based on mathematical and scientific evidence. I am going to demonstrate here that the dorm is not overbearing by the aforementioned. So you must have some way of looking at dominance. So in PPS 7, Planning Policy 7, it says that dominance can, referring to point 31A from PPS 7, dominance can be increased when the neighbouring property is at a lower level than the development site. The property at number 34 and number 36 are at higher ground levels. Reference the planning statement above, it would be fair to say that the opposite would be true, and overbearing dominance would actually be decreased. Again, PPS 7 does say that loss of light is usually a consequence of dominance. So referring to A31 again, it would be fair to say that if there is loss of light at number 34 and number 36, then we would know if dominance or overbearing would be occurring. We can test light using the 25-degree rule. So I've shown it there. This is a well-known publication of testing dominance and overbearing, and I've applied it in my section below using the 25-degree rule. Now you can see on the example of dominance that the line is very close to the building, but you can see in my section the hypotenuse line is absolutely nowhere near the extensions.
Excuse me, sorry, Mr. Campbell, your 5 minutes speaking rights is now complete.
Okay.
Mr. Campbell, I'll give you a couple of minutes just to sum up if you'd like.
Yeah, so I basically showed 2 scenarios there, and one with the dormer and one without the dormer. The roof is already at nearly 45 degrees and the wall's at 90 degrees. So there's not that much difference. The other thing too, with the overlooking issue, or if there is any, that the Resvalix is on the roof already. And I just want to finally point out something here. As an architect, this is my final thing. As an architect, I have never witnessed the level of behaviour and tactics from a neighbour. Objections to a planner permission is normal. What is not normal is a neighbour harassing and intimidating your family and the construction workers.
Mr. Campbell, I'm going to have to call a halt to you there. I'm not here to referee neighbourhood disputes, neither are members of the planning committee. So I thank you for your presentation here, and open it up to members. Members, if you've got any questions for Mr. Campbell, please do indicate either in the chat box or for those here in the chamber. Raise your hands, the usual. Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Kieran. And just to point out, at the very start, I was one of the ones that took opportunity to attend a site visit, and I suppose it's rare to have the opportunity to attend a site visit and actually, in terms of a retrospective application, because usually you're trying to visualize what the application would look like. In this case, we could see there was a clear demonstration of how that or what the outcome of the application would be. But one of the things that I would want to state in it, and it was very evident to me at the site visit, is the quality. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, Councillor, I understand, Councillor, that there's a bit of a preamble, but obviously do bear in mind that these are questions as well. Councillor Jackson, go ahead.
10-1, Chair. I sort of lost my train of thought now. But in terms of one of the things that jumped out at me at the site visit was that there was the quality of the approved application, the approved development on the site. You can see how the impact that has, and it actually improves the overall area. It's a very high quality application, or high quality development, and I want to congratulate the applicant for the work that was carried out in that. But when you're looking at it, you're looking at it in terms of the dormer, and when we look at the dormer and the dominant impact, or the potential dominant impact that would have, it's worth considering that there was always a roof there, and that there is permitted development rights in terms of pitch windows and stuff like that. I just want to get a better understanding of the necessity of the dormer, and I suppose in light of the potential option around permitted development for those pitch windows that you can see consistently along the neighbouring property. So just around the rationale for the dormer itself, I just wouldn't mind a wee bit of information from the applicant around that. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jackson. Mr. Campbell, so the rationale in relation to the development as we see it now?
Yes, well, I tried to design the house as a passive house standard. The rest of the rationale between the dormer is a bungalow design is actually very inefficient. You've basically good ground floors, but you actually have a very inefficient first floor. The problem with the first floor too is that you've got side attics that are actually cold ventilated side attics. They're actually outside spaces, and you've actually one above you in the attic. So the idea of there's many ideas here, but obviously one was to solve the problem of the cold side attic. The other thing too was the rest of the house was addressed in terms of the passive house standard to make it efficient and make it better spaces. So the last piece of the puzzle was the actual dormer. The dormer in a sense wasn't a new extension or a footprint on the ground. What I was trying to do with the dormer was the space was already there in the side attic. All I was doing was trying to form another triangle on the roof, which is already at 45 degrees, and make the best use of space at that area, because it just didn't make sense to have the rest of the house fixed in this area not. So that's why I done it. I literally only made a triangle on top of the 45-degree roof to create extra floor space, which allowed me to have an ensuite and an extra bit of space at the back of the house, making the house far more efficient. I'm not trying to make the house bigger. I'm trying to make it, from my training as an architect, I'm trying to make it more efficient and a better house in terms of energy efficiency, a better air tightness lines, and all different stuff that I can't really get into here in technical. But again, what I done too also was I put a flat roof on the dormer too to keep it 1 meter below the ridge. Many of the dormers that you see around the city have flat roofs that are actually right up at the ridge. So I kept it down as much as I could. And that's basically some of the reason why I did it.
Okay, well, Councillor Jackson? Yeah, okay. Members, any other questions for Mr. Campbell? Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you. I was also on the site visit. I think I was quite impressed about what got into a small space. And to see, looking at it, and again, there's a large section to the right as we look in the back, and that has been approved. So it's only the dormer that we're talking about. I'm going to look at their submission. I'm going to see 13, image 13, and image 14. It doesn't grasp on me, that it's dominance over the alternative. That the roof element versus the dormer. But the main question, I can appreciate your presentation. My question would be that if this wasn't to go ahead and this wasn't meeting your family needs, what does have a potential that you have to move out that would have a detrimental effect on those that you're providing care services for?
Thank you, Mr. Gallagher. Mr. Campbell?
Sorry, say the last part again. Sorry, I missed the last part. Sorry, Councillor.
If this didn't go ahead, and therefore it may not be meeting your needs, your immediate living needs, would it have a detrimental effect on those next door to you that you have caring needs for?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, absolutely. Look, my mother lives next door to me, or has the house next door to me. She's MS. She has flare-ups. I'm under no impression of the way the future is going to go in terms of, obviously she's getting worse and worse. I have an elderly aunt too that I'm trying to provide some accommodation for. She wants to stay in the house. She wants to stay in the street. So what I'm trying to do with this house is I'm trying to provide enough accommodation that I can actually meet their needs and keep their independence going as long as I can. Just on the point in the dormer, and I just want to make this clear, I think it's very unfair too, because Councillor Jackson already says the materials that are used in the house are high quality. The photographs that have been shown, the house is not finished. There's a scaffold there, so it's very unfair to show the house in that context, you know what I mean? So, but again, look, the way we are at the minute now, we're basically we're basically out of the house that we were living in. We're getting to the stage now where we're homeless. The process is taking that long. I spent the night in a conservatory last night. My wife spent the night in the toy room, and one of my babies, the baby, spent the night in the living room. So this process, the planning process, has been going on and going on and going on. I mean, dragging out. And look, we're financially, because of COVID, and you all can understand the way the prices have gone with materials. Like, to take that dormer down again, I don't think it's a problem. And from my professional point of view, when it's all bricked up and there's nice glass and the glass is all frosted, it'll be a really nice building. But at the minute, it's just a scaffold and it's a building site, and it just doesn't look well in the photographs. So, like, again, yes, we're really at our financial needs. We really, like, this has just gone on too long, and we just need to get it. We really need to get it sorted now and moved back into the house. You know what I mean? Because, as I say, we're literally homeless. It's just been dragging on too long. And my mother, as I say, my mother has needs too. My auntie has needs, and they want the house finished too. So everybody's asking in the street why it's taking so long, and everybody's been so supportive. You know what I mean? Because they know what we're going through. So I don't know what else to say about it, to be honest.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Campbell, for that answer. Councillor McKinney.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Campbell, my mother too had MS, so I know where you're coming from by caring, looking after. Unfortunately, she's not with me anymore. But this is a retrospect. I'm going to straight question here. Why did you not submit the plans before you started building it? That's just a straight question.
To be honest, when we started building the house, it's like anything when you're doing a renovation job. We started stripping the building back, and you probably see in one of my images there. We obviously noticed that the insulation was all black. I talked with the consultants. Obviously, costs were issues. Always wanted to do it, but obviously cost was an issue too. But when I talked to the timber frame subcontractor, he says the amount of renovation work that we were doing in the house already, because we were introducing steel beams into the house, it would actually be very easy to do. So I took the opportunity and they repaired that part of the roof, the side attic of the roof. I thought I was doing a good thing because I was getting rid of the cold side, the side attic. I was creating extra space. I was making the house more energy efficient. For obviously, we're trying to do a bit for climate change. So all these pros outweighed any cons. And as I said before, I addressed the rest of the problems in the house, and this was the last piece of the jigsaw puzzle. This was the bad area, so I thought I'll address it now on the recommendations of the contractors and myself, and obviously cost was very important. So I done it there and then. And then in reality, and you can see in my documentation, in reality here, people keep talking about this big dormer. It's not a big dormer. The flat roof level is the same level as a gutter level in, say, a house in Carnhill or Shantalla. This is not like a 3 or 4 story house. It's just a 5 meter flat roof. Even the ceiling heights inside are actually only around 2.4. So this is not like a big dormer as people are portraying it to be. It's a flat roof dormer on the back of a bungalow. That's what it is at the end of the day. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Members, any other questions? Or Mr. Campbell? Okay, Mr. Campbell, nobody's indicated they've got any further questions, so thank you for your answers to that. And again,
Thank you,
you two are welcome to stay. Please do stay. In fact, I'm sure you will. Members, open to questions for the officers. Mr. Gallagher.
Thank you. Question for I'm going on this further. No evidence that was submitted and a number of the images, and I see like when you're looking at image 12 on the photographs, and you can see this dormer and it comes out, and I'm guessing 2 feet from the flat roof next door, or from the pitch roof next door, and the applicant's argument around the 25 degrees. Does the question being to the officer, like the dominance argument in the presentation by the applicant, for me, squares the dominance to being on the other side, i.e., this is lower ground and the other one being higher. And what we're talking about is 2 feet off a pitch roof. It's the next door. Did you see, if you can see on image 12? So the question being, do you believe that the applicant has provided a fairly good argument around not being dominant?
Hey, just for clarity, Councillor Gallagher, we're working with 2 image 12s now because obviously the applicant sent us an image 12 and we have an officer image 12. Which one, or is it both that you're referring to?
Applicants.
The applicants, thank you.
Okay. Image 12 shows the dormer in context. Image 12 does not show the dormer and its overbearing impact on the residential amenity of the two properties which we visited that day. The officer, I mean, the planning judgment here is made on the basis that there is a real detrimental impact on the residential amenity of 34 and 36 St Francis Terrace by the scale of the creation of the box dormer. I appreciate that, you know, but that photo is other than for showing the sort of the side profile, that photo does not demonstrate how dominance has been overcome in any way. And don't forget, like the SPPS is very, very clear in terms of protection of residential amenity in dense urban areas, I guess. So no, that doesn't address officers' concerns that, you know, that are clearly set out in the report, whereby it's contrary to the policy.
Anybody else? Councillor Logue? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to ask Suzanne, do you see the information that was sent on by the applicant regarding all the mathematical terms and the drawings, the diagrams and that? Do you use planners, use them or as any type of a guide, or when you know, is there any similar that you use?
So as part of every application for a house extension, usually in the urban area, in the appendix to the policy, there's a guidance on a light test. So the officer would look at that through every planning application, right? But as I outlined in my presentation, there's no issue here in terms of loss of light. The issue here is really the scale. So I would have no, you know, those calculations, couldn't tell you if they're right or wrong there. You know, they're submitted at 2:05 today. What I do know is that, you know, the officer has assessed the application. We don't feel that there is an issue in terms of loss of light. But that doesn't mean there's no issue in terms of dominance and overbearing. And that's very clear on the ground that there clearly is dominance and overbearing.
You want to come back in, Patricia?
Just a personal comment, like I suppose from my judgment of it, what has been already approved here and from what has been added on, I don't see the dominance. I really don't. Given that the outer part was already approved by the planners and the dormer part, while it's retrospective, I just don't give, if it had been coming out more or higher or whatever, but I don't get the dominance issue here. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Logue. Councillor Jackson.
On a similar point, and I'll go straight to the question, Chair. In relation to the dominance and protection of residential amenity, I'm assuming the exact same tests were applied to the approved extension. Now, I just wouldn't mind picking up on the comments from the previous two councillors. What has changed in terms of what's more dominant in respect to this in comparison to the approved extension?
Okay. So firstly, the approved extension is slightly, so that, I'll try and put it up on the screen here actually. The approved extension is slightly lower in terms of the two projections that on the ground. So both the first floor and the second floor are just slightly lower, previously approved. The clear difference is the creation of a box dormer. There was no box dormer approved. Under the previous planning application, it was a pitched roof with just Felix. Okay, so the creation of the box dormer is what is, you know, what we're saying in the report is creating the dominance, and the impact on residential amenity, which is clearly impacting on the two other properties, and the residential and the gardens and their downstairs living rooms, which we obviously looked at that day out inside.
Want to come back in again? Yeah, go ahead.
And I just wouldn't mind a wee bit more clarity in relation to how the box dormer is clearly more dominant and having a detrimental impact on the neighbouring properties, because when I'm looking at the site and when I'm looking at damages here, my overall impression is that what's approved is a lot more dominant than the what's in front of us now. So I just can't understand how a dormer would have a greater detrimental impact on neighbouring properties or impact the amenity of neighbouring properties in any way, or in any way more than what's already been approved.
Is there a question in that?
I just wouldn't mind a wee bit of clarity, because we've heard, and it's contained within the report, that there's a clear detrimental impact of this, and it's just a clarity around it, because what's my first impressions is the dominant element of this this extension is what's already been approved. The dormer, from my looking at it, it isn't very clear how that is having a detrimental impact on the residential amenity. I can't see it, so I just wouldn't mind a wee bit of understand. It would be different if it was if it was finally balanced, but contained within the report is that this is clearly dominant. This is clearly going to have a detrimental impact. And I'm failing to see how it's so clear that this is going to have a detrimental impact over what's already been approved. Because what's clear to me is the most dominant feature of this is what's already been granted permission.
Right, Councillor Jackson, I didn't honestly hear a question on that. I know you're making an observation, but it's very difficult to work out what the question is there. But what kind of clarity are we looking for, Councillor Jackson? Sorry, Councillor, yes, go ahead.
Clarity on the report where it's saying it's dominant, when the clear dominance is what has already been approved.
Okay, right. I think if you want it, if you can, attempt to.
Well, I think, officers would disagree with that point in terms of what's, the creation of a large box dormer is increasing the scale of the rear extension, okay? It's increasing the hemming in, which is clearly written in the policy. And it's increasing that issue, that creation of a dominance. There is a large extension approved, and what I've said is, look, I think that is at the maximum what we can look here at this rear elevation. So it's that's entirely members' view what you consider to be dominant or not. But in terms of the officer position, I think it's very clear this is a large box dormer with 3 windows in it. And that is not something we want to see in such close proximity to the rear private areas of other gardens and of other properties in this really dense urban situation. Don't think it's appropriate. The policy protects against it. The objectors have raised very valid planning material considerations around it, and that is the reason that the officers we've arrived at the recommendation we have today. But I accept members entirely are entitled to take a different view on that.
Okay, thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, members. Councillor Mooney.
Thank you, Chair. There's no questions, more just observations and based on what other members have said. I mean, I think from the outset that just like they say that I couldn't condone anybody, developing anything without any proper planning permission. I think that should be made clear anyway. But based on everybody else's observations and based on what I've heard as well as, I'm looking at the photographs supplied in the pack and by the applicant yesterday. I am struggling. The visual representation I see all the time is the permitted development that has occurred, that grey or bluish with the black windows. That's the most dominant aspect I see. What I also see is the already existing smaller dormer window on the left-hand side of the photograph. But the existing structure that is in contention here to me, and this is a common sense judgment that I'm looking at through my own eyes, is that it is not the dominant feature in this photograph. The existing property which has permission, the existing structure that I see is the most dominant feature in any photographs I've seen, whether from the officers and from the applicants. But and on that basis, I'm just putting on the record that that's what my visual representations I see on this anyway. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mooney. Anybody else got any questions? Not. And clearly, what you have in front of you for consideration, members, as a refusal of LA 11 2022 0169F. So that's where we're sitting with this. Obviously, if anybody has any counter proposal, then I would have to hear valid planning reasons for why that might be the case.
Chair, I want to propose that we don't accept the officer's recommendation and that I don't agree that it's in contrary to policy X1 of the addendum to the planning policy statement 7.
Okay, Councillor Logue. Councillor Logue saying on the basis that effectively her interpretation of policy EXT1, that you may well wish to consider overturning the recommendation to refuse. If that's the case, members, obviously, I would, if there's an agreement with Councillor Logue, I need a seconder.
I'll second it, Chair.
Councillor McKinney.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor McKinney. Okay, members. So, we have a recommendation based on the fact that Councillor Logue is proposing that policy EXT1 isn't relevant in this particular case. Councillor Logue, is that correct? Yep. Yeah. And we will now, of course, put that to the vote, members, and I'm going to ask the head of planning to call that out first.
Thanks, Chair. Remember, this is item 3, and the proposal is not to accept officer's recommendation to refuse. It's not contrary to extension EXT1. Alderman Alan Breslin.
For.
Thank you. Alderman Keith Kerrigan.
For, Maura.
Thank you. Alderman Thompson.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Jason Barr.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Raymond Barr. Councillor John Boyle.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Angela Dobbins. No. Councillor Paul Gallagher.
For.
Councillor Christopher Jackson.
For.
Councillor Dan Kelly.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Patricia Logue.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Kieran Maguire. Not here. Councillor McKinney.
For.
Councillor Sean Mooney.
For.
Okay. So that's 4 more. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 4 against.
Okay, members, thanks for that. Thank you to the speakers who joined us today as well. The result of that vote, almost unanimous, members 10 for, 1 against. So again, thank you to Louise for coming and presenting, and to Kevin as well. Wish you well going forward, both of you. Okay, members, There's two further items for decision today. As you're all aware, protocol really only affords us the opportunity to take this meeting through to 6 p.m. If we were to start another application at this point, that would potentially run us to 7 p.m. Protocol would not permit us to do so. I've consulted with officers, and so at this point, at almost quarter to 6, I think we all bear in mind that we knew we were going to be coming back here tomorrow anyway. And so therefore, I bid you all adieu. We will suspend the meeting and reconvene tomorrow at 2 p.m. Thank you.
Cheers, John.
Oh, okay. Thank you.